Hey friends, before the video begins, I want to thank you all for 200,000 subscribers. That's unbelievable, and I can't wait for the next 100,000. To celebrate, my good friend YaManTV has created some custom artwork of the Let's Read avatar, and for those of you who wish to support the channel further, can do so by snagging up the limited edition Let's Read t-shirt over at tblastr.com/letsread. Shirts are $18 and offer top-of-the-line comfort and probably the coolest graphic you'll ever wear. Sales end July 23rd at midnight. Thanks again, so much, and enjoy the video. One of my most vivid memories is from the morning of my 5th birthday party, 1994. I went with my mom to the grocery store to get the cake, balloons, etc. We were in the ice cream aisle, me looking on one end and my mom on the other. I was totally in her sight the whole time, but for whatever reason, she kind of missed the whole incident. This couple, probably early 50s, approached me and started talking to me. The lady was overweight with a long, stringy gray ponytail. The guy looked like a trucker or something. Shaggy hair and beard with a hat and big glasses. They asked me how old I was, and I was proud to finally say I was 5 and that my birthday party was today. They asked me what my favorite ice cream flavor was. Vanilla. Of course, it just so happened that they had a fridge full of vanilla ice cream in their RV that was parked outside the store, and that I should come have some to celebrate my birthday. Even my naive 5-year-old self was like, nope. They were gesturing for me to walk with them, and the lady even put her hand on my shoulder to guide me. I booked it down the aisle to my mom. I guess they didn't realize she was my mom since we weren't standing together. I told her what had happened, but since she didn't see any of it, seriously no idea what she was doing, she kind of brushed it off. They must have gotten out of there pretty quick because they weren't there when I tried to point them out to my mother. When we left the store though, there was a super scary looking RV in the parking lot. I'm 99% sure I narrowly escaped some really weird stuff happening to me in there.
Happy birthday.
When I was only 14, my dad got me a job at the country store, a sort of family-run general store right near my house. It was owned and ran by a nice Italian family that has always been close with my own. I was paid under the table to stock shelves, cash lotto tickets, mop the floor, etc. My favorite activity was bundling up and heading into the coolers, which were like a giant fridge of silence where I could stock vitamin water and read the little stories written on the wrappers. It was pretty much soundproof and was positioned opposite of the front counter and manager's office. I worked at the store for my entire high school career, growing very close to the 3 generations of family that worked there. I also became more and more skilled. Not real skills, just placing orders for milk and knowing where to find certain kinds of wine and beer. And so I was a valued employee. Then, the grandma and grandpa sold the store, rather suddenly, to the typically stereotyped Indian convenience store owner. Of course, I was saddened by this. It was my senior year, and I was looking forward to working and saving up until I left for college in the fall. Luckily, the new manager, Andy, kept me on because I knew a lot about the way the store ran and knew all of the regulars. Andy was a great boss and so understanding when I had to take time off to play sports, etc. However, he hired a new family member who barely spoke any English. I was frustrated, but tried to make the best of it. After a few days of working with this creep, nicknamed Buzz, I noticed him staring at me. It made me really uncomfortable. Being one of the only girls at the store, I was used to customers being gross, but not someone I had to work with. I shook it off, thinking that May was approaching, my 18th birthday, and so I would soon be done working and setting off to college. And so the creeping continued, and escalated. Buzz was a very gross man, always having bad breath, and seemed to only know dirty, disgusting jokes in English. He was always trying to tell me jokes about women's pubic hair and such, and all the while getting uncomfortably close. I barely managed to polite a smile at these. Finally, my birthday had arrived. I was excited, and in my favorite place, the back room, stocking 6-packs of beer. I was humming to myself with my earbuds in when I saw movement to my right. The cooler is gray with black rubber floors and freezing metal walls. The room was only lit by the lights on the sides of the fridge doors. I spun around to see Buzz standing behind the crates of milk I had yet to stack. I took my earbuds out and asked what he needed, assuming he was grabbing something for a customer. He just smiled and approached me. "Your birthday now?" he asked me. Yeah, it is." At this point I was so confused when he started reaching into his pocket. He took out a $20 bill and held it out to me. I responded, No, please, I can't take that. You guys already pay me." Or something lame like that. However, he kept pushing the bill into my palm. I closed my hand around it, not really knowing what to do. He then went in for what I assumed was a hug. I looked back on this and cursed my manners. I was just letting this happen. I was shocked. He closed in on me and suddenly turned his head, trying to kiss me on the lips. Of course, I turned away, but not before I could feel his tongue and lips with wet saliva grazing my cheek. It was absolutely disgusting. I immediately pushed him off of me, shouting, "No, no!" repeatedly. He came after me again, and I could feel tears welling up. No one could hear me, and this full-grown man was going to do God knows what to me back here. This place that was a solace to me growing up was being ruined. Buzz held me with one arm while I was swiveling away, trying to get to the door. He grabbed my ass with the other arm, pushing on my jeans, trying to pull at them. This is when I broke loose with a knee to his groin and ran out of the store. I got physically sick in the parking lot. I hopped into my shitty '95 Ford Taurus station wagon, which coincidentally didn't start. Luckily, I had a lot of friends from the neighborhood, and it didn't take long for a friend to come and pick me up. I called the previous owners before the police, not really sure how to handle the incident. The grandma of the family, who was a tough woman, came out to the store immediately, only to find Buzz running through the back door and into the woods. He didn't have a vehicle. She chased him and screamed at him, but of course he was gone. I went to the police and they were pretty much zero help. They were small town and had no idea how to handle it, and I think they were trying to suggest I had been stupid or even wanted it to happen. Of course, Buzz was never found, and I was told he was actually in the country, illegally.
Happy birthday.
It all started in my last year of high school. I had gotten really into the hardcore scene from my city and attended a bunch of small gigs with my best friend. One day I received a Facebook friend request from a guy named Alan. Looking at his profile and the stuff he posted, I noticed he was just 3 years older than me, from the same city, and liked many of the bands I did. So 17-year-old me added him. We soon started talking, mostly about bands and school. He was in the middle of getting his college degree, and I was about to choose mine. From time to time, he would tell me about how pretty I was and asked if I had a boyfriend. I did find him attractive too, so I flirted back. However, I quickly lost interest since a few minutes after flirting, he would tell me he actually had a girlfriend, but they were having some trouble. I didn't want to take part in any kind of cheating or stuff like that, so I just told him he should think what was best for him and his girlfriend and do the right thing. From then on, I limited my chats with him to music and school, and he too stopped flirting with me. A month or so passed without texting when suddenly I got a message from him. We talked like we used to, and just before I had to say bye, he told me he had broken up with his girlfriend and felt so much better. He thanked me for always listening to him without judging and said that my advice had really helped him. I felt happy for him. I honestly don't know if this girl was really mean or not, but he seemed happy to be out of the relationship and I wanted to be a good friend, so I was happy for him too. Now, at this point, I don't know what came to me. Maybe it's because I did find him attractive or because it was very late and I wasn't making the best decisions, but I told him my best friend's birthday was in a couple of days and that he should come to the party too. He agreed in a second, and I told him to meet me at the station close to her house. So I finally got to meet him at the station after almost half a year of talking online. I know what you're thinking, and no, he wasn't a 50-year-old sexual predator, although I must admit I should have been more careful since he could have been someone interested in taking my liver. Nevertheless, we met. It was a bit awkward at first since neither of us knew what to say, so we just walked to my friend's house making small talk. I guess we were both very nervous. When we got there, things got better and we actually had a good time, although he pretty much only talked to me. For the next month, we kept going out for basic dates until he officially asked me to go steady and we became a couple. From here on, the actual creepy shit would start. It hadn't been more than 3 weeks and I started feeling anxious. It's a weird feeling that I used to have when I was little and knew I was going to be punished for either getting bad grades or doing something bad in general. It was stupid though, because I was not a child anymore and wasn't doing anything wrong. I just had this feeling whenever he was around me. What made it even more complicated is the fact that I didn't really feel he had changed. He wasn't rude or anything. He was just unsettling. He would want to see me 24/7. We never went to his house, and whenever we were at my house, he would refuse to be anywhere else but my room. He would spend hours just staring at me, and believe me, I know you could take all of this with romantic intentions, but the way he made me feel was not warm and fuzzy, but instead shivery and anxious. I must admit I took the first chance he gave me and broke up with him. He meant to text his ex some lyrics to a breakup love song and texted them to me by accident. He apologized and explained it was just to let her down for good. I had none of it. I told him we may have jumped into the relationship thing too soon and that I thought it was better if we went back to being friends. That night he called me 37 times. The next morning I had school, and through the day I got a text that immediately got me nervous. "What time will you be home? I'm coming to talk," he wrote. I really didn't want to see him, so I told him I wasn't sure and that he shouldn't go, he should just leave it. Plus, we'd only been dating for like 4 or 5 weeks, so why make a big deal out of it? Just let it die. I did in fact get home late that night and, oh surprise, guess who was standing in front of my door? He had a blank stare, and when I was passing by to park the car in the garage, he followed me with expressionless eyes. I went inside and left my stuff in my room, shaking. My brother came in and asked me what the hell was going on. He said Alan had been standing outside for over 4 hours now. I told him I would handle it, since he's my little brother, so I didn't want to have him worried. I took a deep breath and went outside. We argued for around an hour, in which he would tell me he loved me and that he knew we were meant to be together. I told him I wasn't feeling comfortable and I just wanted to go back to being friends. He told me to move in with him. For a few minutes, I was speechless. He used this thing to explain he would get a job and keep studying so I could finish high school and then get a job too. According to him, we would then start a business together and have our first child by the time I was 21. He had our life planned out, and apparently I had no say in it. I managed to catch a moment to speak and tell him straight out he was out of his mind. I was only 17 and nowhere close to thinking about living with him, much less having a child. Alan then made this weird face like he wanted to cry, but not actually. I swear it was like a cheap acting trick and it just creeped me out even more. I cut him off, told him we were over, and ran inside. From here on, he got worse and worse. He would text my friends even if they had no idea who he was, and told them to tell me that I needed to be with him where I belonged. I blocked him from all social media since he would send me non-stop messages and post weird poems that had a hint of scary with things like, "I stand in the dark so you can't see me, but you're the light, so I'll always see you." He called my house. If I pick it up, he yells, "I need you," non-stop. If anyone else does, he just hangs up. Now, this kept happening for almost a half a year, and I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I call the police? Well, I think I failed to mention I'm from Mexico City, and I can promise you, no officer is going to take any action against a few dozen phone calls. I don't even think they'd know what to do. Little by little, the phone calls stopped, but he was still sending me texts and dedicating me songs and online radio stations most people from the hardcore scene listen to. This one particular time, he dedicated "Your Betrayal" to me. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Alan became unstable. He would go from dedicating me love poems to insulting me, saying that I was ruining his life. I honestly lost count of how many crazy and scary things he has done in these past years, but I think the worst of them all was this one time a year ago when I went to a concert with my best friend. I was kind of flirting with one of the musicians that opened for the band, and my friend was playing wingman. He went to get us some beers, and just as he stood up, I turned to chat with my friend. I saw 2 figures take the empty chairs in front of us. It was Alan and a girl he introduced as his sister. The moment my friend and I saw them, we froze. A mix of being uncomfortable and scared got to me, and I just looked away. "You cut your hair," He broke the silence, reaching for my bangs. I instinctively pulled back. "It looks great on you." "Everything does." He spoke in a soft but numb voice. I nodded and told him I was with someone, so he should leave the chair. I looked to his sister to encourage her too, but she was absent-minded, playing with her phone. "Do you want a paper flower?" he asked, completely ignoring what I had just said. The guy I'd been flirting with was making his way back, but since he saw 2 other people now in his place, he just drifted away. "Dude, you seriously need to get going." I was losing my patience, but I didn't want to make a scene since the concert hadn't even started and I wasn't getting kicked out. Once again, he ignored me and started making a rose out of a napkin. "Yo, let's go over there," my friend suggested, and I took her on the offer, so I intended. Alan's sister, who suddenly lost interest in her phone, was now grabbing me by the arm tight, keeping me from walking away. Not saying a word, just grabbing me. I tried to loosen myself, but before I could, Alan took one of my hands and put the paper flower in it. Then his sister let go. Now, for what happened after this, I must say 2 things. 1, I am known for being maybe a little too aggressive, but when it comes to people who I cared for at any point in my life, I have a soft spot, and 2, Alan had been beyond creepy, given that it had now been over 3 years and he wouldn't leave me alone, but he had never been violent. Both rules were broken that night. I snapped. I took the flower he just gave me and looking him straight in the eyes, I slammed it against the table so it would lose any shape it had. "You're not a good guy. You're a creeper who won't leave me alone and thinks I owe him a relationship." I whispered close to his face with an anger I don't think I had ever felt. My friend and I pushed through and made our way outside for a smoke to clear my head. We were chatting, and I was shaking and she was trying to calm me down, asking me if I was feeling better and telling me that if I wanted to leave, it was okay. And then we heard the screaming. At first it was some bottles falling and a couple of screams, so we thought someone messed up and they were mocking them, but it didn't stop there. The yelling continued and we saw the bouncers at the entrance rush inside. I quickly put out my cigarette and headed towards the commotion with my friend. In all honesty, I was hoping to see just another bar fight, but it was worse than that. There were 2 tables knocked over and I don't know how many beer bottles broken on the floor. A bunch of personal articles from a backpack were being poured onto the floor, and the responsible for all this was no other than Alan. Quickly enough, one of the bouncers restrained him as the other one searched him for any potential weapon he might have had. His sister, on the other side of the small venue, screamed at Alan and the bouncers some stuff that I couldn't really make out since there was a lot of noise. As they literally dragged him out, I was pushed outside by the crowd and stepped to the side speechless, watching Alan curse and kick. I had never seen him this violent. In fact, I had never seen him violent at all. Then he saw me. "You see what you did to me?" He yelled at me, but since a small crowd had formed around, people thought he was just on drugs, yelling nonsense. "You ruined my fucking life." My eyes started to fill with tears. Maybe it was because I was scared or because I still couldn't fully understand what was going on. What could I have possibly done to him in order to make him like this? Thankfully, my friend found me along the crowd and, without even asking, she dragged me to the subway and back home. I cried all the way. I haven't seen him ever since, but I know he's still around. How so? Well, I now live in Japan, been living here for a year or so. It was my birthday a few months ago and I got a big bouquet of roses with a card that read, "I shouldn't have given you a paper when you deserve the real ones. Happy birthday, my love. Alan."
Happy birthday.
This is a story of my second most memorable birthday surprises. Let me start out by saying these events happened on my 5th birthday with mostly my cousins and also people I didn't know at the house to celebrate. Dad had invited 1,000,001 of his friends, all of them somehow knowing me and my twin. After they had gotten drunk karaokeing in the dining room and eating their beer bellies full, my mom thought it was time to light the candles. We all gathered in our living room, about 20 people hovering over my twin and I, and the rest sitting on the couch or still drinking in the dining room. I should also include that my dad is a domestic abuser, an alcoholic, and had used verbal abuse towards my mom too many times to count during my childhood. The traditional happy birthday song began, and just as my sister and I went to blow out the candles, one of my impatient cousins decided we couldn't do it on our own, so she blew out all the candles herself. My sister and I looked at her, and that's when it started. "Your stupid girl blew out the candles," a voice said in Vietnamese, directed toward the father of her. "What did you say?" My dad, who was the brother of the wish thief's father, yelled at the person. "Don't you talk to him like that," and a punch flew toward the person. After that, I can only remember getting hurried to my room that I shared with 3 other sisters. All of my cousins were crammed through the window my mom opened, and then she rushed back to where the fight was, trying to get to the phone to call the police, which was inconveniently located in the living room with them. I ran toward her, wanting to be with my mom. I opened the front door and saw my dad ripping the wall phone from her hand and throwing it at the floor. Only 2 of the men there, out of roughly 30 he invited, helped my mom just as my dad was about to hit her. The fight circulated outside as all the children got into the spare cars and the mothers drove to my cousin's house, only 15 minutes away. We got into the house, locked the doors, checked if everyone was all right, and separated my 6 sisters and I to try to sleep the event off for the time being. Almost everyone slept together on the floor of their living room with their moms when my aunt came in and said that my older cousin, let's call him Mike, who was about 15, had decided to share with one person. My mom volunteered my twin, who had a mental handicap and might be better off in a bed. That's when he walked out awkwardly, and even I could tell something was wrong with him. The whole room suddenly stopped for a second, seeming like everyone got the same vibe. One of my older sisters, let's say Tessa, stood up and said she would volunteer. I looked at her and saw that she looked unsure and cautious, even seeming slightly scared. I don't know what got into me, but apparently I suddenly stood up and ran over toward Mike and stood next to him, looking excited to be sleeping with my older cousin. I must have been an expert liar as a kid because I still get the shivers around him to this day. We went to his room, closed the door, and turned off the light. I slept facing the wall while he put his arm around me and the blanket to my nose height. Holy shit, he was basically spooning me, I thought. Being the innocent kid I was, I just thought that this was normal. Then I felt a hand. It was in an ordinary place, it was on my stomach. But then he pulled me closer, then stuck his hand in a place I knew was not right. My eyes opened from half sleep and I started at the wall, trying to comprehend with all the intelligence a 5-year-old could have what the fuck he was doing. I tried to scoot away from him, and by the stroke of luck, but very bad luck for everyone not in his room, I heard my dad kick open the front door and the screams of the people in the living room and kitchen. I jumped up and so did Mike, quickly jumping off the bed and opening the door. I saw my dad wielding a gun and pointing it toward my mom, who was on her knees with her head down, begging for forgiveness in Vietnamese while crying. Mike's mom saw me and grabbed me to huddle with the rest of the kids on the couch, which didn't make any sense because he actually had a clearer shot of our heads there. My boss of a grandma bravely went to the wall phone she had, which was right behind my mom and adjacent to the front door, and called 911. A few more moments and my dick of a dad yelling and threatening to shoot everyone. The police arrived and arrested him by force. You'd think that my mom would divorce him and let him rot in prison after that, right? No. My mom actually bailed him out, dropped charges, and then proceeded to let him live back with us. Currently, I am 15 and he is still here. Mike is still here too. He is now married and has a son. He acts as if nothing happened. My dad is seemingly nicer, but still verbally abuses everyone who lives under his roof. Needless to say, I can't wait for my opportunity to move out.
Happy birthday.
It was my 2nd birthday and my mom and grandmother had taken me to our local mall to get my pictures taken at the children's photo store in Charleston, West Virginia. My grandmother lives in a small town about 50 miles away and doesn't come down that often, so my mom thought it would be a good idea that she have some photos to commemorate the occasion. They bring me into the store and consult with the clerk about getting my pictures. My mom had to leave for work and left me with my grandmother and the cameraman. The man proceeds to give my grandmother directions on where to place me and how to get me to look at the camera. He takes dozens and dozens of photos, eventually amounting to around $400. After about a half an hour of taking the photos, the man informs my grandmother that I'm to go in the back of the store in a different room with him. He doesn't tell her why he wants to, but his hidden intentions were apparent to her. She tells the man that I'm not to leave her sight and that the session is over. She grabs me by the hand, quickly pays the man, calls my mom, and explains the situation. I get unnerved every time I think about this. This obviously wasn't planned out, and it sickens me to think that he had probably done this to multiple other babies and more than likely succeeded. Parents, please be cautious of who you leave your children with.
Happy birthday.
First and foremost, I must mention that I and my mother are Caucasian, but my stepdad is Latino, and so my younger sister is half Caucasian and half Latino. Because of this, I learned Spanish growing up. When I was a young teenager, only about 12 to 13 or so, I can't remember exactly, my sister, who was 7 at the time, was invited to a classmate's birthday party, and this classmate was also Latino. My parents asked that I walk her to the party and stay with her till it was over. The party was literally 4 doors down from our house, so it really wasn't far, so I agreed to go without much complaint. Besides, there was free cake. As my sister interacted with her classmates, I sat back near some of the older kids minding my own business when I heard a group of guys off to the side say my sister's name and older sister in Spanish, referring to me. This got my attention, as I didn't recognize them, and I started eavesdropping. It was a group of guys, probably in their mid-20s or so, and I found it odd that they knew my sister's name and that I was even her sister, as we hadn't really been together for much of the party, and again, I didn't recognize them. They were, still in Spanish, talking about my hair, my skin color and such, and then one of them said, still in Spanish, "Man, I bet her pussy is great." And the others laughed and nodded and pretty much thought it was funny. I grabbed my sister up from the party and immediately left. As I passed the group of guys as we left through the back gate, I muttered, "You're disgusting," in Spanish as I passed them, and at first they seemed surprised before the one who made the comments started leering at me. As soon as we got home, I told my stepfather what had happened, and he took me back to the party and asked me to point them out. As I did, they spotted me and my stepfather, who was a very large and an imposing man, by the way, and bolted. When he asked the host of the party if they knew who they were, no one seemed to know. Everyone had assumed they were friends of the oldest son, who was 20 at the time, but he admitted he didn't know them either. That's probably the creepiest part, that not only did they know who my sister and I were, but they showed up at a little girl's party and no one noticed something was amiss with them, or even knew who they were.
Happy birthday.
Last January, I celebrated my birthday. It didn't go well. I was playing some computer games alone in my apartment. That would mean I'd stay up late at night gaming. I was so bored that time because my friends were out of town, and then it was midnight. I was like, hooray, happy birthday to me. I ate pizza, drank some juice, all that introvert stuff. And then the phone rang. I thought it would be my friends calling to greet me because it was my birthday, but who calls late at night? I hesitated, but still I answered it. I heard a girl and a man speaking. I didn't recognize the voice. I asked them who they were and told them that they may have been calling the wrong person. It sounded like the girl took the phone away from the man and answered me. She told me that they know me and that they were looking at me right through the window. The girl sounded drunk because she was giggling. I was like, what the fuck? I don't remember giving strangers my number anyway. I hung up and continued playing some computer games. After a few minutes, the phone rang again, so I answered and told them to stop fucking with me. And after that, I stood up from my desk and went to look at the window. I didn't see anyone. I tried to look carefully. I even used my cell phone to zoom in on some other buildings, but I found none. I started to believe it was a prank call. And then it rang again. I picked the phone up, but I didn't speak. On the other line, they weren't speaking either. It was like they were waiting for me to go first. So I started to ask them what was their problem. The girl then told me that they were outside my apartment waiting for me to open the door. Now I was scared as fuck because I don't know who they are and what they want. I ran to my door and locked it and went to my kitchen and grabbed a knife because why the fuck not? And then I heard a knock at my door. I jumped from my seat and went straight to my bedroom and locked it, leaving my computer open and the living room lights on. From there, I waited cowering in my bed until morning. It was the worst birthday ever.
Happy birthday.
When I was in 5th grade, something really weird happened. We had a classmate who moved to a different town at the beginning of the school year. Where I'm from, this is not common, so we all missed her and wondered how she was doing. Her name was Sophie. I remember it was a Friday in January. It was cold, and as we were getting out of the school, there was this lady standing outside near a blue SUV handing out birthday card invitations. "Are you in 5th grade? Come to Sophie's B-Day. You know Sophie? I'm Sophie's mom. Come to her birthday party. Jump in." I peeked inside the SUV, and it's empty with a few balloons. No Sophie in sight, just a guy in the driver's seat. Something seemed fishy, so my friend and I went inside to get our teacher and told her about it. As this woman sees us coming out with an adult, she straight up jumped into the SUV and drove off. I don't know what happened. I don't think cops were called, but they did reach Sophie's family. Not only did they live in another state, but it wasn't even her birthday.
Happy birthday.
I think we must have been 11 or 12, and this girl was having a sleepover for her birthday. She was part of our group, and we were excited as we had never been to this particular friend's house. Her parents put an amazing amount of effort into the party. There was a buffet, barbecue, cake, and even a clown. We were kind of embarrassed by the clown. We thought we were too old, and it was just kind of awkward. But that was nothing compared to the dad's party games. First one, find the 50 pence. He hid 50 pence pieces around the house, and we had to find them. Only he was chasing us and hooting and really screaming, like a hyperactive child. Again, we were embarrassed, but the birthday girl seemed to be having a good time, so we pretended to be in the spirit of things. Then there was the wish game. He wanted us to sit on his knee and tell him a wish. Now, I'm really uncomfortable, and I can tell my friend is as well, but the birthday girl's on her dad's knee, telling him her wishes. Before we knew it, he's looking at my friend, patting his lap. At the time, I thought my friend put in commendable effort not to look horrified, but looking back, there is no way in hell he could have thought she was comfortable sitting on his knee. She sits on his knee, mumbles her wish, and then it's my turn. Fool is me, because I thought I would get a pass being a boy, but no such luck. He's patting his knee, looking at me. So I sat on his lap and told him my wish. Nothing overtly sinister happened, but the whole thing put me and my friend at ill ease. After that came the cellar game. That's what he called it, and I'm thinking, hell no. I'm not going into a cellar with this creepy old man, and I could tell my friend is almost panicking at the thought. But then the dad takes up a rug, and there's a trap door under it, leading to the cellar. Then I'm thinking, well, if that's not the coolest thing. So we go down into the cellar. And truth be told, it was pretty cool at first. The dad had a candle, and that was the only light with the door closed. It was a small concrete room, and we sat on the floor whilst the dad told us creepy stories. I got the feeling these weren't age-appropriate stories, and our parents wouldn't have been happy if they had been there, and that made it all the more cooler. He's telling a story, getting to the creepy reveal bit, then he blows out the candle. We're plunged into absolute darkness. I'm laughing and shouting, as is the birthday girl, and my friend's really laughing. She actually sounds panicked. We get out the cellar, and I'm saying how cool that was, but my friend looks really upset. Before bed, I managed to catch her alone and ask her whether she's alright. She tells me that after the dad blew out the candle, he tickled her in the dark and kind of put his head into her neck. She's really frightened and makes me promise I'll stay awake with her in case the dad does something. My friend's asleep, so is the birthday girl, and I'm really tired, but my friend makes me promise, and the truth is, I feel like a knight in shining armor. I must stay awake to protect my friend, and lo and behold, I can hear someone coming up the stairs. Slowly, like they're trying not to make a noise. And then the door opens, and the dad sticks his head around the door. He stays like that for what seems ages, at least 2 or 3 minutes, just watching. He must have noticed me because I'm not making an effort to pretend to be asleep. I'm just watching him, watching her, my friend. He then walks into the room and over to my friend. He just stands over her, watching her. I'm completely freaked out, and despite feeling like a knight in shining armor 10 minutes ago, I have no idea what to do, and I can feel pin prickles behind my neck. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I let it go and made a noise. At this, the dad looks my way. I remember his eyes going really wide, then he sort of scurried really fast out of the room. My heart was trip-hammering away, and I'm looking at my friend, wanting to wake her up. I didn't though, and at some point I must have fallen asleep because I woke up the next morning. Nothing weird happened that morning, and our parents picked us up. We didn't have the heart to tell him as we were too nervous as to what may have come from it. But needless to say, we never went over to that friend's house again.
Happy birthday.
I remember it being around my 10th birthday when everything changed in my life for my family. I remember it being the best birthday yet because my mom had secretly saved up enough money to buy me my own bicycle, and I was more than thrilled. No more borrowing my older brother's when he let me, or standing on the back or sitting on the handlebars of a friend's bike. We were by no means well off when I was young. We didn't have much, so getting that bike had meant a lot to me. My father was a man who worked a lot and drank even more than he worked. I'm pretty sure he was drunk more than he was ever sober, and because of that, he was hardly around. That was okay with me, my siblings, and my mother for the most part. Things were actually nice and peaceful when he was not at home. And the nights he did actually come home, we knew right away to steer clear of him, be quiet, and leave him alone. We lived outside of a small town, down a long dirt road with not very many neighbors nearby. The closest one was a good mile down from us, a really big farmhouse with a lot of fields around them. I remember being friends with their kids as they were around the same age as us and we went to school together. Their mom was very sweet and always offered us something to eat or drink when we'd stop down there. And their dad, well, he was the complete opposite of our father. I never seen him drink or yell or slap them or their mom around. We knew that not every family was like ours and that some fathers out there actually seemed to care for them. Like I said, I remember it being around my 10th birthday because my mom had baked a big cake for myself, my brother, and my 2 younger sisters to share, and of course she had some too. Then she had took me out back where she had hidden the bike from me in one of the sheds, and I remember screaming with excitement, hugging and kissing her, and telling her I loved her and that she was the greatest mom ever. I hopped on it right away and took off up and down the road to test it out. It was a great feeling in that moment. When something so great happens, you kind of forget the regular hell of life you seem to live every other day. It's hard to explain, I guess. Things were good the next couple of days. My father had not really been home for almost a week, probably at that point. Sometimes he would just stop in for a few moments here and there, I guess to check up to make sure my mom hadn't left him or anything. When I was that age, I hardly recall at any point in time when he was home for more than 1 or 2 nights in a week, and never 2 nights in a row. We, the kids, never knew what he was doing, nor did we ever really want to know. We just knew it was better at home when he wasn't there. I remember riding my bike down the dirt road, on my way home from running into town to pick up something at the grocery store for my mom, when my dad's pickup truck passed me and kept heading on down toward home. It made me want to not even go back home, but really, what else could I do? The sun was just starting to go down, and normally if he did come home, it was right after work or very late at night after he left who knows where, so it was kind of odd he was on his way home at this time of day. By the time I pulled up to the yard, I could already hear the yelling. I could hear my mom's voice trying to reason with him for something or other, and then I would hear my dad's voice just overpower hers. I heard something smash. I didn't want to go inside. I could hear my little sisters bawling, and then I heard my mom crying too. My older brother just happened to be down at the neighbor's place that had the farmhouse. I really didn't want to go inside at this point. I heard another smash. I decided to go in because I couldn't leave my mom and sisters in there alone with him. I peeked in the window of the front door before I actually walked in and saw the house getting destroyed right in front of my family by my crazy drunk father. I tried opening the door slightly and getting my sister's attention to come out, but my dad had seen and went from focusing on them to me. I blocked a lot of this out, but from what I can remember, He turned and went straight for me and picked me up by my shoulders and started screaming in my face. My mom was behind him, begging him to put me down, but he just turned and gave her another slap in the face and she backed down. From what I could tell that was coming out of him, he was livid when he saw me riding down the road on a bike he knew wasn't my brother's. When he got home, he confronted my mom on where it came from and how I was on it. He got out of her that she had secretly been stashing away money to save up to get me the bike, and my dad lost it when she told him that. I'm sure he was probably on a 5 or 6 day heavy drinking binge at this point, because I remember the smell of his breath was like sour whiskey pouring into my nostrils as he screamed at me. He was sure that my mother was hiding other things from him, and he was going to find out what. That is why he was starting to tear up the house. In the 5 minutes it took him from passing me on the road until I was there, he had done quite a bit. All the furniture was thrown around, lamps and pictures had been smashed. He threw me against one of the walls, and as I looked up from the floor, he had stormed into the kitchen and smashed what was left of my birthday cake against the back door. Both my sisters were huddled in the corner holding each other while my mom cried and had blood running down her face. That was it for me. This was the worst I had ever seen my father, and I was scared. I ran out of the house, hopped on my bike, and started heading towards the neighbors. We didn't have a telephone at that time, but I knew that they did, and I was going to call the police in town and stop him. I hardly got out the driveway when I heard the front door open and heard my father yelling at me to get my ass back there. I just kept pedaling, thinking I needed to get to the neighbors and everything would be better. That's when I heard his truck start up, and I looked behind me as he was backing out of the driveway and started heading towards me. I could see the neighbor's house in the distance and just kept on pedaling until I started to see the headlights getting closer and closer. I looked behind me and he was so close that I knew he was going to hit me. I remember just jumping off the bike towards the side of the road and tumbling down into the side of the field. I shot up and just started running across the field towards the neighbors, hearing my dad yelling but not really caring. When I looked behind me, I had seen that my father had already turned around and was heading back towards our house. I got to the neighbors a few minutes later and pounded on the door. Their mom opened the door and took a step back because at this point I was sobbing, shaking, and probably didn't look like my normal self. She took me inside and called to her husband to get in there. I was in the middle of telling them what had happened when my brother and his friend walked in from playing out back, and in about 2 seconds he was out the door heading towards home. The mom called the police in town and they said that they would send someone out right away. About 10 minutes had passed and no police had shown up, so I begged the husband to please drive me down to my house. I didn't know what was happening and I was scared. He agreed since he knew my little sister and mom were there. About halfway down the road, we passed my bike. It was completely mangled up. My dad had ran it over with his truck. I started crying again, partly because I loved that bike and mostly because I could have still have been on it when he did that. We get to the house and my father's truck is gone. Apparently my brother ran all the way home, picked up a baseball bat that was on the side of the house, and with no hesitation walked into the living room and smashed my dad's kneecap in. As he was laying there screaming, my brother grabbed my sister and mother and ran into one of the bedrooms. He managed to crawl out to his truck and drive away, though. The cops showed up just a few minutes after the neighbor, and I arrived and took a look at everything that had happened. They found my father about an hour later, one town over at the local tavern. Said it wasn't very hard to find him since he was a well-known drunk in the area, and the bars were the first places they were going to look for him. They arrested him pretty much on the spot. That night after the police found my daughter, the neighbors invited us to stay with them for however long that we needed to. My mom was embarrassed, but so very thankful for their help. We only stayed a couple of days, enough time for my mom to make arrangements to leave that town and go live with my aunt, her sister, for a while, and a couple 100 miles away from where we lived. I never did see my father again after that, and I have never really minded that. I know he wasn't in jail too long because shortly after we got settled in at my aunt's is when the phone calls and letters started, but my mom never caved and went back. Who would? After a year or so, he gave up and agreed to a divorce. I never really paid much attention to that as I was still young and was living a different life than I had before. We stayed with my aunt for a couple of years until my mom saved up enough money after getting a job to get her own place. At that point, my brother was 16 or 17, so he also was helping bringing in money from his job, as well as myself with a newspaper route. I even saved up enough money to get myself another bike. Life was better than it ever had been.